once again with another English literature lesson, and you all are welcome to the program of Guru Gedara. As usual, we can go ahead in our lesson after discussing the summary of the previous lesson. Let's start. Yes, bringing Tony home, lesson 5. Then we'll discuss about the previous lesson, recapitulation. These are the points we discussed in the last lesson. Yes, we discussed different versions of the story about Tony, mother's version, then father's version, and the version of Mrs. Mendes. Then finally we came to know what kind of advice given by father, narrator's idea regarding the story, Casablanca, poem, the charge of the Light Brigade, and the story related to that poem. Then, narrator's English teacher, Mr. Aryaratna's interpretation of the story and the poem. Then you find comparing and contrasting narrator's action with the story and the poem. Finally, we find father's final judgment of Tony's missing. Then we find memories of Greenland. Then we find a flashback about the tennis court and playing tennis. So we come to know what happened to the tennis players. Then again we find narrator's second visit to Depanama, and there are memories about 3 brothers. Then the narrator comes to Mrs. Lawrence Perra's place, and you find he meets the dog again, but they have to part forever. Yes. So today we are going to start chapter 3, The Little Train. So I want to remind you about your assignment. Keep your assignments with you and check your answers when I am discussing the lesson. So you find, yes, the picture of little train there, that it is not modern train. You can see in chapter 3, so he revisits his village as an adult. We'll see. The little train is metaphorical throughout the novella. So we find moving train carrying people from one place to another place, metaphorically compared to moving life. And you find the stations. So stations are metaphorically compared to houses. So you can find in their journey of life, you find from time to time they shift their places. Okay, from Havelock Town, then Depanama big house, then Depanama small house, Egodawatha half house, and Egodawatha full house. Okay, those are stations. Then you find memories of the teenage. Yes. So how does he relate about these memories? The narrator goes to a school in Nugegoda by train. That was his first school. So what are the places he passes? First starts from Egodawatha and comes to Vijayarama Junction, then passing public cemetery, then edge of a paddy field, and he comes to the station of Udahamulla. So by the train he travels to Nugegoda. Okay, look at the map. He starts from Egodawatha and comes to Vijayarama Junction. Then you can see he passes the public cemetery, then passes the paddy field and comes to the station of Udahamulla. From there by train he goes to Nugegoda. Okay. Yes. So while he is going to school, again he gets the memories of Tony. Why and how? We'll see. The narrator walks along the church street. when the narrator experiences the cold and chilly environment in the morning, he remembers how he went to Nuwara with his best friend Anton, Mr. Lawrence Perra's family. Yes. So where do they live? They live in Depanama. Again, when he remembers Mr. Lawrence Perra's family, he remembers Depanama. Again, Depanama is related to Tony. Okay? You find a kind of stream of consciousness. So look at the example. This is the quotation. Then memories would come one after the other, and then I heard a barking. It was Tony barking, and the flow of memories would stop abruptly. At that point, like the image, freeze in a movie. But the barking would continue. Tony's image was blurred and faded like an old snapshot. But I heard the bark, sharp and clear, whenever there was a mist over Church Street, and I heard it high above the sad whistle of the little train. Again, you can see the motif of sad whistle of the little train. Okay, and you find this is more like a movie. Okay, you know the narrator is a film director, and whenever he remembers the past events, all the events are related to Tony. Then the narrator sees burger girls in their white uniforms. So again you can see, because of the invasions, different kinds of subcultures are formed in our country. So gradually our country is getting a kind of multicultural society. Okay? Then he tells they have shifted to a full house from the half house in Egodawatta. So he describes the nature of the full house and its garden. Full house at Egodawatta reminds him Gira Ata's house in Depanama. Again you find identical architecture during the same period. Then he says old coffee plants in the garden. So you know coffee was introduced by British rulers. So those are the influences made by those invasions. Then father says that the house must have been built during the coffee days. Even today, when we talk about ancient things, we are telling it belongs to coffee day. So it implies that the house should be old over 100 years. So what happened to the narrator's friends at Egodawatta? You know Sirisena. He went across the paddy field and he was attending to a school at Maharagama. Then Munidasa went through the paddy field and he was going to a school at Dehiwal. Telia or Ratnapala went to his uncle's place at Grandpa's and he was attending to a school in Colombo. Ranal, yes, dropped out of school and works at his big brother's garage at Putlam. So you can see the type of education available during that period. So there were unequal opportunities for education. Only those who were able to afford money on education could get English education. For an example, you can see Ratnapala was able to attend to a school in Colombo. Then Ranal and I had become good friends, and he considered me his best friend because unlike the others, I didn't tease him for not having a father, and he would take me home. And yes, so you can see there were social classes in the society, as well as even within the same group of children, they discriminate certain children. For an example, we can give Rana, but you can see this narrator didn't show any indifference to this child. So both of them became good friends. Another part of the camp, or while the narrator was walking to the junction of Vijayarama, yes, he observed certain things near the camp. These were the quarters for locals, and there were a mixture of Sinhalese, Tamils, Burghers and Malays. So you can see how the society of Sri Lanka becoming a multicultural one. Then I looked up almost by instinct, and slowly the shape of Sripada came into focus, barely visible at first, but my eyes scanning the vague line and bringing into relief the cloud-like mountain range in a darker shade of blue against a pale blue sky. And now I was standing by the bay window on the upper level of the big house at Depanama. So what do you think of this quotation? Is he really at Depanama big house? No. Okay. Now this is the event. He was going to school. He was going to Vijayarama Junction, and this is the event. He is walking to the station. But on his way to the station, this is a scenery that he observes every day. So this scenery reminds him again Depanama big house, because at Depanama big house also, near the bay window, he was able to observe the same scenery. Let's go to the video clip. Here you find the same scenery that the narrator created in his teledrama Pitagam Karayo. We'll see.
ආම් පුතේ සිරිපාදේ.
කොතාත්තේ?
අර පේන්නේ පුතේ. අර වලාකුළු වලට උඩින් අපූර්වට පේන්නේ. කොතක් වාගේ.
Here you find memories of big house at Depanama. What are these memories? Here see, someone is drawing water from the deep well. The pulley is making the harsh grating sound of iron against iron. And you find mother is in the quadrangle wearing the wraparound kimono with a dragon on the back. What is this quadrangle? Yes, that is the courtyard in the quadrangular shape. Then Tony comes and pulls by the fall of his pyjama. Then the sad whistle of the little train is heard. So you find stream of consciousness. Yes. Then after that we find the narrator goes to another school. Earlier he went to a school in Nugegoda, and now he goes to a school in Panipitiya. Now can you remember your assignment? Check the route. Okay? Check whether the route marked by you is correct or not. It was the year 1956. The narrator goes to school at Panipitiya. He takes the bus from Vijayarama. Now these are the places he passes. Vijayarama, Navinna, then Wattagedara, and he comes to Maharagama, then finally Panipitiya. So what special thing do you find here or in this route? Yes, it is the same route he came with mother, leaving Tony behind at Depanama. Oh, it's the same route he came with Tony. He says, I had very carefully avoided any contact with Depanama, which lay on the other side of the high level road. But each morning and afternoon, I was on the same route I had taken with Tony 6 years ago, and I would love to take a corner seat and watch the road go by and recall each point on that road. So you can see still he loves the dog, but he doesn't want to have any contact with the Panama. Why? He might have some kind of guilty feeling of leaving Tony there. Okay? Yeah. Then he says, I looked towards the paddy field on the other side, and the bus was just passing the spot where Tony and I went down the embankment to the field, and Tony drank water from the Peter Eller, and the fish swam around his muscles. So he remembers each and every event. So he remembers how he came with Tony to Egodavatta. You see. Now you can know the event. I mean, now he is traveling by bus, but he is looking outside and looking at each point and remembers how he came with Tony. Yes. Then he says, the smell of ripe paddy and mud was just like when Anton and I went fishing in the fields at Depanama. And now I am walking under the rubber trees with Tony, and the ground is thick with the dead leaves. Again, you find manifold memories. You find multiple memories come into his mind. Okay? And you find tactile imagery. He feels the thickness of the ground. Okay? Yes. So, again remember, at this moment he is traveling by bus. Okay? Yes. Then he says, and now I collect pod shells, ear-shaped and hard, with a sharp edge like a thorn at one end on each side. So, have you seen these kind of pod shells? Yes. So, I think most of the children of modern day have not seen such kind of thing. Then he says, and I hold the ends between my thumb and forefinger like this, okay, and blow hard into them like, okay, yes, hard into them, and the shells spin with a low humming sound, and the birds in the trees get agitated, setting up alarms all over. So, not like today. Those days, they made their own toys using the things in nature. Okay? We will see this kind of pod shell and how he makes a spin. You see, the rubber shells spin with a low humming sound. In the picture, you find the raw pod shell in green color. Then you find the dried one in brown color, and beside you find the seeds. So, seeds are removed and the shell is taken, and this is the dry pod shell, and see how it is made. Fixing two opposite sides, and you find the thorny shaped edges, holding using thumb and forefinger, and see the final product. So, those days they enjoyed such kind of handmade toys. So, you again find those days people lived close to nature. Then he remembers how Tony was barking furiously at a garden lizard. In the picture you can see a garden lizard. Then the evil looking garden lizard is blowing and hissing like an angry dragon. Again, look at the simile. Like an angry dragon. The narrator is in the classroom and his Sinhala literature master, yes, now here you can see the shift of scenes. Earlier he was travelling by bus, thinking of Tony and how he came with Tony. Now suddenly the scenery is shifted to the classroom. Now he is at the classroom listening to the Sinhala literature master, Mr. Jayakodi. See what he says. Mr. Jayakodi teaches Salalihini Sandeshaya to his pupils. So what is this Salalihini Sandeshaya? So it is the kind of classical poem written in the 15th century. Okay. So again you find the cinematic technique, the shift of scene suddenly, like in a film. Yeah. Then while the master is teaching the lesson, what is this boy doing? See, he engages in a delicate operation. You find delicate operation made by the narrator on Padmini's pigtail with the help of Karunatilaka. So Karunatilaka is one of his classmates. So they tie the pigtail onto their desk, and when Padmini stands up to give an answer for the question of the master, she was not able to stand up properly and she shouts loudly, and the whole class was laughing and the master got angry. You can see what happens next. Yes, you can see Mr. Jayakodi's anger. Yes, and you can find his reaction on this boy's mischievous act. His little eyes have come out of the sockets and flash with cold, undiluted anger. And I get up and the uproar begins to recede like an ebbing wave. Again, look at the simile. Receding like an ebbing wave. And now the garden lizard is hissing and blowing, and Tony moves sideways with fangs bared and barking wildly. So you can see the merging of these two incidents into one in an artistic way. So who is this garden lizard at this moment? Metaphorically, he brings out or he compares garden lizard to Mr. Jayakodi. Then look at the punishment given by the master. In the picture you can see, I keep looking helplessly at the dark face and the tiny eyes in front of me, and then there is a blinding flash and a cracking sound, and I close my eyes and hold my cheek. So again you can understand the nature of punishments given by the teachers to their children. Again you find this master while he is teaching, when we observe the nature of his teaching, we find not the child-centered education, but we find teacher-centered education of bygone era. And you find the kind of punishment. Now you know today our teachers don't give such kind of punishment to the children. Okay. Then the narrator revisits his village area as an adult. So you find now up to that he relates his teenage, and after that you find he has become an adult and he revisits his village. The narrator stops his vehicle at the rail gate of Maharagama station. Yes, you find the coming train is not the train he saw in his childhood. So he was stopping at the rail gate and observing the coming train, because in his mind there was the train that he observed during his childhood. So he finds a large train with an electric engine. It's not the little train. Okay, and again he observes the station. Those days, yes, there was a wooden cabin at Maharagama station. It was not a very big station, but now you find station with a two-storied block and a pedestrian. Then he says, I had been trying to trace the landscape of my childhood beneath the changes of the last 46 years. And today, I went through the site of vanished village of Eggodavatta, looking for places I could recognize. So he mentions vanished village of Eggodavatta. So it indicates the urbanization. They were few and far between, and every nook and corner was covered with ugly box-like structures. Again, look at the simile, ugly box-like structure. So those are the buildings. Okay. So you find, he says, natural landscape is vanished, destroyed, and instead of that, he finds man-made structures. Okay. Yes. Then, still he had the relationship with this Ratnapala or Thelia. Yes, he says in later period he became a famous actor. Okay, he says from Thelia he comes to know that all the fish in the canal had been killed after constructing Apico factory. Again, you find industrialization, urbanization, and how these harmed the natural environment. Further, he says, Borales tank became a mud hall. So, this was the period of around 1996. Okay. Then he observed those Kandahena estate. Okay. So, he finds that Kandahena rubber estate disappeared, and instead of that he finds box-like concrete houses. So, he never finds natural landscape he experienced during his childhood. He further says TV antenna on roofs look like trees in a dead forest. Again, look at the word dead. There is no life anymore. And look at the simile. Antenna on roofs look like, okay, yes. Then he goes to small house at Depanama. So, can you remember the small house at Depanama? Yes, it was on the slope to the fields between Kandahena and the quarry. The narrator remembers the three brothers. Who are these three brothers? Piyasena, Jayasena, Jinadasa, who lived by the edge of the quarry. And he remembers how they taught him how to make a boat with plantain tree trunks fixed together with thick pieces of bamboo. Again, you find the toys they made using the things in nature. Okay? Yes. Then he says, finally, his memories stops at Tony. Did you notice? See? And Tony, who couldn't get in the water, kept barking madly from high ground and where I was standing now. So at this moment, he was standing at the place where Tony was. Then he drives in Borala Pannipitiya road and he goes towards the area where a British Hurricane fighter plane crash landed during the Japanese air raid. Can you remember the event? I told it earlier. Okay. So he has some recollections on this incident. So how does he record that? I still have a clear recollection of seeing the wounded pilot being taken on Hackery, driven by Carter John along the road in front of the house. And the white man was clinging to the backrest of the Hackery like a frightened monkey with a large crowd following behind. Okay, look at the simile. Okay, yes, Hackery like a frightened, yes, like a frightened monkey. Okay, yes. Now, the mood of the white man was compared to a monkey, frightened monkey. And look at the picture here. Okay, There you can see a kind of hackery. Yes. So, what did mother say regarding his memory? See, mother was pretty sure I had constructed the whole scene from hearsay in later years because in 1942 I was 3 years old, and according to her, it is not possible to remember that far back, and over the years I came to doubt it myself. But now I remembered the scene more, and it seemed quite real. And if it was otherwise, like mother suspected, it didn't seem to matter anymore. So, see, I have underlined that part. Why? Yes, this is related to the epigraph. Can you remember that? Because the narrator recreated the event by his memory as well as certain part of the story are fictitious. So, it doesn't harm anyone or anything. So, that's why he asked, it didn't seem to matter anymore, relating to the epigraph. Then he says, I saw the corpse store with its low flat tile roof after 46 years. So, you know, now the narrator is revisiting his village area after about 46 years. In the place of Veragal estate, he finds flat roofs and TV antenna. Again, you find urbanization, industrialization, as well as environmental pollution and destruction. So he says, opposite to the corpse shop, he sees the old house where Virakodis lived. So these are some of their neighbors when they were living at Depanama. He remembers how he learned his first song and imagines how Nirmali Akka sang, Ase Madhura Jeevane Geeta. So those were the popular songs during that period. Nearby, he finds Gira Ata's daughter's half house. Can you remember Gira Ata, who brings milk bottles early in the morning? Yes. He guesses the old woman in front of the house should be Appuhami's youngest daughter. So, who is this Appuhami? He is the husband of Gira Ata's daughter. So, the woman now he sees should be the granddaughter of Gira Ata. Then he remembers Chutti as a little girl who worked for them as a domestic helper. So you find, not like today, those days little ones were taken as servants at the houses. Now it is prohibited, you know. Although he wants to talk to her, he doesn't stop the car because he was not sure whether she will identify him or not. Then his eyes are focused to the next point. Yes, the big house at Depanama, his favorite place. Why? Look at the quotation. The house where Tony came into our family as a roly-poly fluffy pup. That is the reason. The narrator, as an adult, is at the big house in Depanama, and his mind is full of past memories. So you can see his nostalgia to the past. He says, I was in the big house and standing in the veranda, and the babble of children's voices came from beyond. So he feels as he was in his childhood. So he says, I held Tony in my hands, and he was warm against my chest, and the singing rose in a crescendo. What is this crescendo? Yes, rising gradually. Okay. I heard the toot of the car horn and rushing to the window. So the red car with the long bonnet turned into the side road. Look at the picture. This is the nature of vehicles they had those days. And father came out of the garage loaded with parcels, and he dropped them and carried me in his arms. The roly-poly fluffy pup started yapping continuously from somewhere. Again, he gets manifold memory but finally stops at the point of Tony. Again, you find there are symbols which indicate their wealth during that period. You find the red car, lots of parcels, okay, big house at Department, like that. And next to the big house, so he remembers the old man with grey hair on his chest. Yes, so when he passes the big house, there is an old man with grey hair on his chest, and he identified the person. He is Edmund, the big boy next door, who taught the narrator to make trains out of empty matchboxes. So, can you remember those days? That is how children made toys. They had handmade toys, not ready made toys like today. Then, although he wanted to speak with him, a kind of inhibition disturbed him. Again, he was doubtful of thinking whether this person would identify him or not. Then, passing the spot where there was a patch of jungle in those days. So, those days means now he doesn't see that patch of jungle. Then he remembers Roma, the madman. Then he remembers how the tall, dark man, Demetrius, carrying a gun emerges within the dark wood. So, it creates visual imagery. Okay? Yes. So, during that period, there were such people. So, in the picture, you can see such kind of face. But the place has changed now. Yes, you can find the changes took place as follows. But now the land has been cleared and some Buddhist center was being built there. Near Mary Akka's boutique, there were 3 small houses built out of earth bricks. So, you know, earlier there was only one house, but now there are 3. So, you can observe a chain of thoughts coming into his mind. Look at these thoughts. Now, he questions himself regarding the past events. Would Giraata still emerge through the mist early in the morning, his head wrapped in sarong, and advance slowly like a bogeyman with 2 bottles of cow's milk in hand? So, you find the visual imagery there. Then he says, would all that be gone like the rubber trees of Kandahena and Veragal estate, giving way to flat concrete rooftops sprouting the dead plants of TV antenna? Look at the metaphor, dead plants of TV antenna. Okay, so he has used the word dead. So he indicates that there is no more life there anymore. Next, the narrator meets Jayasena and he talks to him. So, what happens? Will he be able to identify the narrator? No. Jayasena cannot recognize the narrator. He is confused, and you find he stays as the same villager, and narrator goes there wearing that European kit and by car, and for Jayasena, this person, the narrator, is a gentleman who came from the city. So, there is a distance between them. So, that's why Jayasena got frightened to talk to him. Then the narrator thinks, if I spoke to Chutti and Edmund earlier, on the road, I would have had a similar response. And yes, that's why he didn't talk with them. Yes, why only the narrator can remember all these past events? Why? So you see, he has a strong attachment to the past. So when someone has such kind of attachment, from time to time, that person remembers the events in the past. So he never forgets the thing because he was interested in them. That's why he still can remember the things in the past. For Jayasena, it is not so. He has a monotonous life. He is the same villager there. And you find the Pannipitiya railway station. So he tells the changes he observed in this railway station. He says cactus bushes were gone. The embankment didn't look as steep as the narrator remembers, because when he sees that embankment, he was a small child. But now he is an adult. So for him, now the embankment is not that much big. The railway lines have been widened into the broad gauge. During Mr. Samarasingha's time, the balcony was open. He remembers how father played tennis with Messrs. And the story ends with lots of reminiscences. What are these? Yes, you find the things repetitively throughout the story. Wake up in the morning under pink mosquito net. Then Prema, the servant girl, comes quietly and rolls it up. Then Tony, as a pup, comes bouncing and jumps into the bed and starts licking his face. Then the narrator holding the pup. He stands by the bay windows in the dining room, and mother is in the quadrangle wearing the kimono. Then father comes by red Jaguar car and Guneris opens the door. Father comes inside the house with lots of bags. Father lifts the narrator by both his hands. The pup was yapping continuously. He hears the sad whistle of the train, the motif. So look at the quotation. It merged with the hoarse and the anguished cry of a dying animal, and the broad gauge train with its box-like electric engine, pulling the amber-colored wagons with white and ash bands. Again, you can see box-like electric engine, simile. Okay, so you can see this cry, anguished cry, sad cry, dying animal's cry was compared to the painful cry of the dog. And even the sad whistle of the train reminds him the painful cry of the dog. Then he says, roly poly fluffy pup continued to yap 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 from somewhere, but now it was nothing mischievous or joyous. It was the plaintive cry of a chained dog trying desperately to be free. So that is the end of the novella. So we are going to discuss the literary techniques of the novella. You can remember in certain events I brought out those techniques. I was explaining the events. So here you find them summarized. Then we come to the epigraph. Then the central character is not named throughout the novella as a flashback. And you find the language is pregnant with visuals. The first chapter, the sunset, foreshadows unhappy ending. And you find cinematic technique or shift of scenes. Look at the examples. There were so many examples, but I am showing here only a few. You can find others in the book. Yes, example. My legs curling and uncurling pressed against my thighs with clenched fists, but the cold wouldn't go away and kept shaking me and cutting and stabbing me, and it hurt badly with my teeth chattering and my head blooming. So, up to that, you can see how he got fits at the crest of Navina Hill. Okay, then the next scene, father's voice droning, Sabbantaraya Baya Dukha. So, in the next scenery, he is on his bed, and you find in the first chapter, you find shift from reality to fantasy and from fantasy to reality. Then, can you remember the literature lesson of Mr. Jayakodi? Explain in the lesson. See, white lilies, their smiles, their lips, the red water lily, lotus face they see. So, next part, you can see the delicate operation of the narrator. And I dropped the end of the pigtail into the little slot on my desk. Then you find different types of imagery: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, olfactory, and tactile. We will see some examples. Visual imagery. See, slowly shape of Sripada came into focus, barely visible at first, but my eyes scanning the vague line and bringing into relief the cloud like mountain range in a darker shade of blue against a pale blue sky. Then he says, I could see an edge of one of the panes where it caught the sun, and that edge was green too, faded, dirty oil green. Beyond that was another green, leaves, wet and glistening in the sun, and looking unusually fresh and clean. Then auditory imagery, sound of the tennis racket. Yes, you find he brings out the sound as tuck, tuck, tick, tock, and it is an onomatopoeia. Because of that, it has become an auditory imagery. Then puppy's sound, yap, yap. Then when Ton is drinking water from Peter Aller, lap, lap, lap. Again, it is an onomatopoeia too. Then the sound of the iron pulley as the rope bearing the bucket rungs over, rungs over. Then sad whistle of the little crane, the painful cry of the dog. Next we discuss the kinesthetic imagery. So there you find the action. Tony came out nowhere, charging and barking, see, leaping, turning, twisting. So you find lots of action, see, rolling, jumping, licking, whining, mourning in a delirium. So here you find a mixture of imagery, okay. Then I sprang up and twisted and turned and bent trying to pull the books from behind my back. Again, twisted, turned, sprang. Next one, roly-poly fluffy puff would come bouncing and jump into the bed. See, bouncing, jump, kinesthetic imagery. You find lots of actions. Then gustatory imagery. Water tasted like when it is taken from galvanized bucket. He talks about the taste. Then the olfactory imagery. There are lots of examples in the novella. See, the glass smelled vaguely of sardine. So he talks about the unpleasant smell. Then Tony always smelled good. Then he says, Panmalla, which I carried and which smelled of onions and milchard rice. Then he says, Mother came with a cup in hand, and along with her came the smell of horlicks, the warm and familiar smell of after fever time. So the narrator deals with the smell. I was seated on Rita's lap, and she smelled of Yardley's lavender talcum from the nice jar. Then the fresh smell of eau de cologne all over Anne. So again he talks about the smell, and we also feel the smell. The water in the stream was warm from the sun, and the smell of ripened paddy mixed with the smell of mud. Again, we feel that. We get such kind of smell in a natural environment. Then you find tactile imagery. Yes, roly poly fluffy pup. He feels the softness of the pup, and he says, I squatted by his side in the gloom of late evening and felt him warm. Again, he feels the warmth of the pup. And my fingers were moving through the soft light brown coat. Again, he feels the softness of the brown coat. Again, he says, and I kissed him lightly on the forehead, and there was a quick movement of the muscle touching my cheek. Again, he feels the quick movement of the muscle. See? Then he says, now I am walking under the rubber trees with Tony, and the ground is thick with the dead leaves. Again, he feels the thickness of the ground. Then, the narrator has used techniques used in the film direction, and you know, this novella is more like a film. So, what are the examples? The narrator uses the words cut, mix, and he says only the visual came with no sound, like when the soundtrack of a movie is switched off. Again he says there was a time lapse here, a slow mix like in a movie. And again he says all flowed past me like traveling shots in a movie. And then there's a slowing down of the pace. The images begin to hold longer. Then it was Tony barking, and the flow of memories would stop abruptly at that point, like the image freeze in a movie. But the barking would continue. Tony's image was blurred and faded like an old snapshot. Next example. The train came again, and the whole sequence repeated itself over and over again, like a looped movie. Yes. Next one. Then slowly, like a picture coming into focus, the sound became clear, sharpened and tuned. Then we find some examples of stream of consciousness. There are many, but here I will discuss only a few. Then it would be cold and chilly and dark in the shadows, and I would think of Noor Elia, where I had been once with Mr. Lawrence Perra and his family, because Anton has insisted that I be taken because I was his best friend. And when I thought of Anton, I thought of Depanama, and then memories would come one after the other. So there you find a chain of memories. Okay. Then he says, the bus was just passing the spot where Tony and I went down the embankment to the field, and Tony drank water from the pitta ala, and the fish swam around his muzzle, and the paddy was ripe and heavy with grain, and the smell of ripe paddy and mud was just like when Anton and I went fishing in the fields at Depanama. And now I am walking under the rubber trees with Tony, and the ground is thick with the dead leaves. So you find lots of memories as a chain comes into his mind. Yes. Next one, manifold memory. Again, you find multiple memories come into his mind. You find this part in the last part of the story. At the end of the story, you can see how the events are connected by the word and. I have highlighted the word. Tony, the roly poly fluffy pup, would come bouncing, and jump into the bed and start licking my face, and I would hold him warm against my chest and go out of the room to stand by the bay windows in the dining room, and mother would be down in the quadrangle wearing the peacock blue wraparound kimono with the red dragon on the back, and I would look up and beyond the trees and beyond the paddy field and above the green haze and see the clear line of the blue mountains far, far away. And now the red jaguar with the long bonnet was coming slowly, and you can find some more. Okay? Yes. So you find, yes, the parallelism between Pittagam Karyo and the narrator's real life. So I told you certain incidents in Bringing Tony Home are included in his teledrama Pittagam Karyo. Yes. So you find the narrator and his family are also Pittagam Karyo in this story. In other words, outsiders, because they don't have a permanent village. They shift their houses from time to time. And you find the tone sad and melancholy. You know, the narrator was disappointed at the end of the story. And you find many similes. Yes, I will give the examples and you can find some more. I drove home, I felt disoriented, like when coming out of a coma. Then Pittagam Karyo, like a drug, had got into my bloodstream. The holy peak, like a single brush stroke on the blue sky, the little compartments already lit and moving in a chain like a glowworm. I felt comfortable, like someone was holding my hand. Breeze came over the paddy fields, making me cool, like when mother spread a piece of cloth dipped in cologne. I was moving again, not with any conscious effort, but just moving like a sleepwalker. The smell of rain hung in the air, which moved around silently and stealthily like a cat. And then, all at once, it struck like a thunderbolt. She was frighteningly thin and flat, like a steamroller had gone over her. Look at the sense of humor of the narrator. Okay? The Navin railway station, a picturesque little building more like a cottage. In the picture you can see. Then I heard the whistle of the train and it was like someone calling. The road moved like a giant drain between the two compounds. It moved like a great big animal. Hoarse metallic horn, more like the cry of a dying animal. Train, which is a black barrel with a red protruding muzzle like a dragon's mouth. From the rooftops bristled TV antenna like trees in a dead forest. The white man was clinging to the backrest of the hackery like a frightened monkey. Burger girls in their immaculate white uniforms came floating down like angels. Then metaphors, little train moving from station to station. So moving train was compared to moving life and station was compared to houses. Then the two drivers of Mr. S.W.R.D. Bandaranaike and Sir John Kothalawala. Yes, they represent those two personalities respectively. The shooting of Pittagam Karyo was a prolonged nightmare. Then we came to the end of our lesson as usual. I summarize what we discussed today. then the kind of punishment given by the master. Then I would like to give an assignment as usual. Now we have reached the end of the lesson. It's high time for me to wind up the lesson. Till we meet in the next session, goodbye. Have a nice day.